N7 Day 2023 is less than a month away. So today we're going to look back at N7 Day 2022, kind of take another deep dive into everything we got last year, and maybe do a little prediction about what this next N7 Day in only a few weeks may bring us and may tease us with this time. If you like Mass Effect, if you like video game news and speculation in general, please subscribe to this channel. Hit the like button if you like the video. Comment down below with what you think we might get in this year's N7 Day, and maybe just say hello. Okay, so let's jump into it. The first thing we're going to look at here is the N7 Day blog. And so this was posted last year. If I remember correctly, it was posted like in the early afternoon, at least for my time. And the whole day, I felt like a lot of fans and we were all kind of sitting, waiting for anything to happen. And then it finally did. So the first thing we have here was the N7 Day banner. I remember when the blog first dropped, I remember, looking through everything, and I remember initially going through it and being like, oh, there's no trailers or anything. And then we started digging into the details. And so the first thing we see is in the background of the N7 Day banner is this city. There is a larger version of this we're going to look at later. But I think this is, it's definitely in the Sorry planet or in a Sorry city somewhere. And it could be Ilium, and we will talk about why in a bit. One of the big things they did here was introduce a bunch of the directors. So the project director, the head of the game, Mike Gamble, who, we've talked about quite a bit on the channel, and anyone who's covering Mass Effect stuff has talked about them. We have Danielle Enns. This was an interesting thing because this was the announcement of her taking this job, essentially. This job, the senior development director, was posted a few months before N7 Day, and up until a couple weeks ago, I'm recording this on October 12th, it was the last job listing they had for Mass Effect until just a couple weeks ago here in 2023. So, she being in that position and getting hired for it was, as far as we can tell, the final director position for the job that's been hired. And now we've been, over a year now with them having their full director staff on while they're sitting there in pre-production, which is really, really good. You need the directors to get all of the big decisions made, and that seems like where they're going. Now, last year, we also had the announcement that Mary DeMarley was leaving her previous position and coming to BioWare specifically to be the narrative director for the next Mass Effect. Her previous games that you would probably know were the last couple of Deus Ex games, as well as the recent Guardians of the Galaxy game, which a lot of people seem to not play because of some bad carryover feels from the Avengers game, but that Guardians of the Galaxy game was supremely written, had amazing characters and dialogue. And at the time, even before she got hired on in this position, myself and others talked about how that Guardians of the Galaxy game really felt like a Mass Effect game, but in today's world, the way games are made now. And her being part of this project is just still the thing I'm the most excited about, more than likely. And then BioWare veteran and Mass Effect veteran Parrish Lay is the franchise creative director. They announced them here as well. Parrish, I believe, did a lot of the cinematics and such in the trilogy. And so having an OG like that, everyone's missing Casey Hudson and now Mac Walters and all of that. Well, having Parrish there is a good thing. And there is still some of that old blood with the new blood. Now, as we scan down through here, we really got to the point where we were dissecting every little bit of art that we saw here. And I have to admit that I did that here, where even just a few weeks ago or a couple months ago, I was like, oh, wait, is this a hint that the Normandy, blah, blah, blah? This is a loading screen from Mass Effect 3. So it's a good lesson that not every single thing we see is a hint or a clue. Some things are just cool concept art that they decide to post. Last year, they announced that there was some cosmetics that you could have for The Sims. We will talk about this. This is the Citadel. And here in a moment, I have this kind of taken and isolated, and we'll talk about that in more depth. Here they talked about a bunch of new BioWare merch that was being made by various different companies, and then right here we had one of the pictures. This is the same as the banner. I have a larger version of this that we're going to cover here shortly. Now we had a little parting letter here, and then this was kind of the, well, here's what's going on. This is over, about a year old now, but it could be nothing. But, and they talk about this strange footage from one of the monitoring stations in known space, and then this video pops up. And what this video is it's mostly still footage. You see some of these ships moving around and stuff like that, but there was this garbled audio, and pretty quickly people deciphered the audio, and then the Mass Effect official page put out a official version of it, and this is what it sounded like.
I can see it. How did we miss this? Exactly. The Council will be furious. Although they should know by now not to underestimate human defiance. Perhaps was the most endearing fate.
And so obviously people were really excited by this. Hearing Liara speak as Liara, we know that her voice actor is coming back, and she announced that actually a few years ago that she'd be in the next game. How much, we don't know, but that was already pretty heavily hinted or revealed during the 2020 the Game Awards trailer that announced that this project was happening at all. And so hearing her was really awesome. There's a lot of speculation about who the person is that she's talking to. A lot of people assumed it's Geth because of the garbled nature of the speech of the person that isn't Liara. I've pushed back on that pretty hard because it doesn't make any sense why a Geth would be speaking to her in like their Geth noises, because they always spoke to organics in a universally translated language like Legion and some of the Geth primes and stuff like that. So I think that whoever she's talking to, it's probably an important detail, and it's very purposefully encoded or encrypted so that obviously anyone listening in on Liara's conversations can't hear her. But if you listen closely, at the end there she says, although they should know by now not to underestimate human defiance. Before that she says something about she sees this, the Council is going to be furious. In theory it's in reference to this mass relay that looks like it's being constructed by hand by some organization. These colors are reminiscent of the elusive man Cerberus, even though in theory in the post-Reaper War time period, no matter when this takes place, they should be mostly eradicated, but there were probably a lot of Cerberus troops left over, and high up ranking people from that organization. So who's to say they don't try to continue their mission even after the events of the Reaper War. So if we jump in right here, I will open these up kind of individually and we can take a peek at them. A few things I noticed about this. So this is that banner, but this is the full picture of it. And there's a few things that are interesting here. One of the big things is all of these little logos are very reminiscent, if not exactly the same, as some logos that we see in the merch or in the stores in Andromeda. Now, some people took that as to be like, oh my gosh, is this Andromeda? I highly, highly doubt this is Andromeda. This seems way too built up to be anything even within a few hundred years of even Mass Effect Andromeda. I wouldn't expect us to have these kinds of cities there yet. My guess is that this is an Asari city in the Milky Way, potentially Ilium, but maybe another planet, that these businesses and these logos that they're associated with would have existed in the Milky Way, because everything in Andromeda came from the Milky Way. Like, that's a thing people forget a lot. So even in the 2020 trailer, when you see some armor that looks kind of like Initiative armor, it's good to remember that everything the Initiative had started in the Milky Way. So there's very, very few things that would show up in the Andromeda that we wouldn't possibly see in the Milky Way. There'd be things like Ket armor and things like that. But otherwise, just some logos being similar or the same doesn't really say that this is Andromeda, but who knows, I guess. A couple of the more telling things here is if you look back here in this area, in the back of behind this A and D, is this big circular shape. And if you ever are playing Mass Effect 2 and you look over the cityscape when you go to Ilium, you see a bunch of these domes. This is a very, very, very Asari architecture thing that is pretty clearly messaged, and it being here again reinforces my idea that this is definitely from an Asari city, as well as the general architecture at all. If you look at it compared to the buildings in Ilium, especially some concept art from back in the day of Ilium, it's the exact same type of architecture. Another clue is right down here in the bottom right corner is an advertisement with an Asari on it. There's also the SFX 5, and so a lot of people think this is SFX was the code name for the first Mass Effect. It was like Science Fiction Game X or whatever, and 5 is a pretty obvious reference to the fifth Mass Effect, which this next game will be. I don't think it's gonna be called that. I think it's gonna have a subtitle, but it is the fifth game in the franchise. There's also in the middle of this D, if you look at this, the top of this building, there's a 5 there as well, and that is very, very, very much in the Mass Effect font language. So the last thing I'll point out is people have been talking about like when this game will take place. I think a slight clue we have is if you look at this shuttle and this sky car. I would assume if this game was taking place hundreds of years after the events of the trilogy, that we would see some differences in the tech, like the vehicles and things like that. But this shuttle and this sky car look exactly the same as in the trilogy. So maybe they just haven't updated it. Maybe this just because it's concept art. I don't know. I suspect though the concept art would still reflect it if that was the goal or if that was the direction. I'm still pretty heavily in belief that this game and this concept art is supposed to be taking place relatively soon after the original trilogy. Now, if we scroll down here, we take a look at this, which was also in one of the banners on the blog, and this is the Citadel. It appears to be in its more normal configuration that we saw it in during most of the trilogy. Obviously, at the end of Mass Effect 3, things change a bit, but this is the Citadel. Now, some interesting things about this. One, it's not lit up at all. We are used to seeing pictures of the Citadel where you see all the lights from all of the buildings. I mean, there's many, many millions of people living on this ship. So seeing it completely blacked out is interesting, though it could just be the nature of this art. We see a ship here with the reflection of its engine glow coming off of the Citadel here. It's, I don't think it's really notable what ship this is. We can't really tell. But the most notable thing here is seeing this planetary body in the background. And that's notable because in the trilogy, besides at the end of Mass Effect 3, when the Citadel is brought to the Sol system and orbiting Earth, its previous location, there's no celestial bodies. There's no moons. There's just the sun. It's the Citadel and the sun, and that's it. So this little bit of concept art showing a planet or some kind of sphere in the background, to me, this is concept art of the Citadel in the Sol system, and that's probably Earth, but it could be the moon. But I definitely think that this next game, I don't expect the Citadel to have been moved. I think it's going to stay in orbit around Earth, and I think that's going to have gigantic influences and repercussions in the politics and the relationships and everything about the next game, because it's very much going to put humanity front and center and leadership and things like that, not to mention because of Shepard's role and the Alliance's role in the defeat of the Reapers at all in Mass Effect 3. So I think this is really cool concept art, and it was kind of snuck in there, and it's just so funny how that little sphere is probably a pretty meaningful thing. here we had, I believe this was concept art posted by Mike Gamble after the game, after all of the teases came out. There's not too much to be noticed from this. A couple of the things is over here on the right side, this sign. It's the same vendor sign that you see in Mass Effect 2 on Omega. So that's definitely interesting. We see like I said before, the sky cars and stuff that definitely appear to be of a similar generation or style as the trilogy ones, kind of further backing up that point I had. In the background here, we have these big towers with some type of beam energy, something coming through them. I don't know if these are supposed to be like ezo mines or what. I am not really convinced this is Omega. I was at one point. This looks a little too elegant to be Omega, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. Whatever they are, they look really cool, and I suspect that whether these are some type of thing that keeps the atmosphere on this planet going or something like that, we'll have to wait and see. And the reason I say that is that it seems this planet is compromised in some capacity, because if you look at this Turian right here, he has a tube on his shoulder and then what looks like a face mask on, and then there's a Solarian and a Krogan in the background, and the Solarian pretty obviously has like a gas mask on, and the Krogan has a little tube right there, suggesting the Krogan has one as well. And considering the environments that Krogan can exist in typically, that must suggest that this planet is extremely toxic, because I believe Krogan tend to be pretty resistant to those types of issues and typically wouldn't need a gas mask. But this was some cool art. I don't think there was too much to glean from it, but maybe we just missed something, and we'll look back years from now and say, oh, how did we miss that? Now, I do want to look back at this. It's a higher resolution image than what we saw before, and that this is pretty obviously a relay in construction. Now, I don't know if this is a relay that was blown apart during the India Mass Effect 3, and they're using, organic tech to put it back together. Maybe the remnants of it are underneath this, or maybe this is a relay they're building from scratch with their lessons, what they've learned from the Reapers and the mass relays and such since the event of Mass Effect 3, and they've figured out that they have the ability to make their own relays, especially knowing that in the end of 3, the relays in most cases, I think all cases, are at least damaged at the end of the game. Maybe instead of rebuilding them or fixing them, there's this idea to make their own. Now, my theory on this is that this was a Cerberus project that may have been in progress even before the events of Mass Effect 3. And part of the reason I've guessed that is that it has Cerberus coloring on it, and the MR7 everyone has taken as Mass Relay 7. Well, I believe Mike Gamble at one point came out and said that that's actually not what it stands for. My big time speculation is that it's Mobile Relay 7, and that since Cerberus was a smaller military compared to the Alliance and the Turians and all of the other big militaries from the species, my guess is that they were trying to make these little mobile relays as a way to move their forces around faster, to be more mobile and agile than the larger forces. And this was one of their strategies to try to outflank and outmaneuver the bigger militaries they were going to face off against. But they obviously didn't finish the tech, and in the post-Reaper War galaxy, where like this kind of tech would probably be extremely useful, someone's trying to finish this work that potentially was started by Cerberus, and in the footage that we saw from the N7-day post, Liara is seeing this, is talking to someone about it, saying that the Citadel is going to be mad, and saying that humans may have something to do with this. So I don't know if the Alliance is doing this. We're seeing all kinds of ships around here. Many of these ships do look like the kind of old school Alliance freighters and stuff like that. But the last thing I'll kind of point out here, or one of the last things, is that if you look here, if you look out here, if you look right here, below my picture here, these ships all look a lot different. All of these other ships look like what we've seen before. These other ones don't. and they look a whole lot like little miniature versions of the arcs from Andromeda, where they have the ship in the front as a kind of like a long cylindrical object, and then these like 4 kind of fins poking out from the back. And this has been another thing where people have speculated like, oh, this must mean Andromeda. I don't think so. Again, everything in Andromeda came from the Milky Way. My guess is that the tech they used on the Nexus and the arcs to go a little bit faster, to not have to dump their energy more as often and such, is going to be utilized in the post Reaper War Milky Way as a way to get around the galaxy quicker while they rebuild the mass relays or while they figure out other solutions. And so my guess is that we're going to see this as either Initiative inspired tech, or the Initiative, the remnants of it that didn't go to Andromeda, may be a faction or a power player of some capacity in the next game on their own. The last couple things here, there is something notable here that it's just interesting that we see these numbers, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7, and this little pillar is sticking off of 4. We saw the references to 5 in other art, and referencing the 5th game. Some people have speculated that this is signifying that this is the 4th game, in the sense of it's going to be this, maybe this next game is a direct sequel to 3, as opposed to being a sequel to Andromeda or being a whole new kind of series on its own. That's all speculation, who knows. But the last thing is down here in the bottom, we do have this little bit of information where it's saying vacuum dock relay construction record, monitoring station operated by Green Dagger Limited, property of Deep Space DHAO SAV. I believe this is a reference to the Alliance. Ship captain sub Navark Soral Zillion Jones. This is an interesting one because it seems like it's a Quarian name, but with a human name involved. And so there's some question about, is this a Quarian that is maybe got married to a human, and that's how they handled their name and things like that. But we'll have to wait and see. And then we have a reference here. It says for interior use only. We have the SA 314 11.7, which is a reference to N7 Day, at least in my opinion. And then we have a bunch of other stuff here. Now this 90 is interesting because the trilogy takes place in the late what is it, the 2130 2180s or whatever, and this date, if you want the game to take place shortly after 3, matches up. It's 2 or 3 years after the events of 3. If you want it to take place at any other time, you can just say that it's another 90 date. And I think that's what's fun about all of this, is everyone's bringing their own hopes and dreams into the speculation on this next game. And until we have proof of anything, go nuts. Now, what's interesting about that art that we got last year is that it's absolutely an evolution of this art that was in one of the art books from like 10 years ago or from a long time ago. And it seems like they're definitely going off of that. What's different about this is that all of these ships look a lot different than what we see in the more recent art. This does look a lot more futuristic and look a lot different. The other art also shows this object over a like a cloudy planet that's kind of brown and looks organic, while this looks like it's sitting over like a shipyard or a like very, 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 very industrialized planet that doesn't have, you know, many organic clues and things like that. We still right here have the 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 with this little docking pillar or antenna or whatever sticking out from underneath the 4. And you know, take from that what you will, but it's definitely cool to see updated art of this turned into something to be teasing us more recently. The last thing here is probably my biggest bit of conspiracy. I want to show this first, and you can look down here and see what appears to me to be a reflection or a shadow or something. I've said that because of some of these artifacts you see all over this screen, that this might be we're looking at like a monitor, and we're seeing reflections and glare, and it even says in the blog, For now, there's something we want you to have a look at. We've intercepted some strange footage from one of the monitoring stations in known space. It could be nothing but. And then we see this, that little video with this. And so, that it's footage, like maybe we're supposed to be looking at it through a monitor, and monitors reflect things. And when down here, we see a white, red, and white stripe. I can more clearly illustrate it with this picture here. So that's a zoom in on it. It kind of depends on how your monitor settings are, whether you can see it or not. It is also notable that kind of looks like 4 little engines in the background, but who knows? But I just think this is really interesting. And to more clearly illustrate what I'm talking about, I did a very crude paint job. Why I think that's interesting is because I think at this point we've had a reference to an N7 in every single teaser since 2020. In 2020 we had the trailer with Liara holding the shard of the helmet. In 2021 we had the big poster, and I believe one of the figures walking away from the ship on the poster has an N7 helmet on. And then in 2022 we have this what looks like a reflection, and definitely doesn't look like it's an accident. This looks very purposeful in my opinion. And it seems like another reference to an N7. I've argued pretty heavily that at this point in the franchise, it's still any reference to an N7 is a reference to Shepard. I know people have said like, well, there's lots of N7s, and that's true. It kind of doesn't make sense at this time. Like no other N7 has really taken that over, and we've seen so few N7s in the whole series at all that I really believe that this is a reference, and maybe it's just a reference. I have no idea. I want Shepard in the next game. I don't know if they're going to come back or not. If they do or don't, I don't really care as long as the game is good. But last year was really cool. I think that this year is going to be something similar. I think we're going to see something similar with a bunch of concept art, maybe a little video or a blog, like a little teaser of some type, and probably more concept art, and maybe some little hints and winks and stuff like that. I still don't believe we're going to get like the subtitle or the name of the game until after Dreadwolf comes out. And I don't think that we're going to be seeing like huge info dumps until that next Dragon Age comes out, which most recently has been speculated to be happening maybe in the spring of 2024. So maybe by N7 Day 2024, we'll get like even bigger drops. But last year I thought was a bunch of really interesting information that, we've obviously been talking about for almost a year now. And, maybe a little too much at times, but there is a lot of interesting stuff to glean from here. But what they've done really smartly is they've never made anything definitive yet. So everyone's theories can still work. They can still do mental gymnastics and make them work, myself included. And I think they're going to ride that until they can't anymore. Obviously, at some point, they need to define a bunch of things: when the game takes place, who the protagonist is going to be, all of those things, who's still alive and who isn't. But for now, this is the fun part. We all get to guess, have our own opinions, our own thoughts, and that's fun for now. We can get more serious about it later on. And that's what I have for this video. So if you liked it, please hit the like button. If you want more Mass Effect videos, if you want streams and podcasts and things like that, just about games in general, please subscribe to the channel. If you have your own thoughts about last year's N7 Day, the one that's coming up, or you just want to say hello, do that down in the comments below. You can find me all over the internet as Bond Diesel, including over on Twitch, where I do stream a couple times a week, but I multi-stream, and you can catch those streams right here on YouTube as well. I have a weekly gaming news podcast where I do talk about Mass Effect quite a bit, called The Bonfire. It's right here on this YouTube channel, and it's on all podcast platforms. I think that's all I have for this one. So until next time.